We understand the reason why the State Department decided not to have Ambassador Sondland appear today. I mean, it's based on the unfair and partisan process that Mr. Schiff has been running. When you think about what the Democrats are trying to do, impeach the President of the United States 13 months prior to an election based on an anonymous whistleblower with no firsthand knowledge who has a bias against the President. And the guy running the process, Chairman Schiff, didn't even tell us that he had met with the whistleblower prior to the whistleblower filing the complaint. Adam Schiff didn't tell us the way he treated Ambassador Sondland last week in this, Ambassador Volker in this interview last week. That treatment is the reason why the administration and the State Department said we're not going to subject Ambassador Sondland to the same treatment. And look, we were actually looking forward to hearing from Ambassador Sondland. We thought he was going to reinforce exactly what Ambassador Volker told us last week. But again, unfortunately, when you have a Speaker of the House who says we need to strike while the iron's hot, when you have a chairman of the committee who is so biased against this president that he wouldn't even tell us that he had met with, his staff had met with the whistleblower prior to the whistleblower filing the complaint. And frankly, this is a pattern with Mr. Schiff. He did the same thing, if you remember, the first big hearing the Democrats did this Congress, Michael Cohen. He didn't tell us that his staff had met with Mr. Cohen for hours prior to Mr. Cohen testifying. He didn't tell us that last summer he had met with Mr. Simpson out in Colorado, palling around with the guy with Fusion GPS. So this is a pattern. Like I said, we were hoping to hear from the ambassador today, but we understand exactly why the administration, exactly why the State Department has chosen to say, look, if it's going to be this kind of process, if you're going to selectively leak text messages, 67 pages of text messages we had, they take a handful and release to all of you, and not give the full context and not release the transcript, we understand why they made this decision at this moment. I'm going to let some of my...
Ambassador Sondland says he's disappointed that he wasn't allowed to attend this deposition today.
Yeah, and I said the same thing. We wish he would have been able to testify too, but we fully understand why the administration made the decision they did. When you're going to have a chairman release certain parts of what was said in a closed-door interview and not release the entire transcript and give it context, you can see why they didn't want to subject Ambassador Sondland to the same kind of treatment.
Do any of you have concerns?
There's no wrongdoing here. Isn't that all the more reason why he should be allowed to come up and testify and just answer all of your questions?
Yeah, there is no wrongdoing. Ambassador Volker was clear. Remember, Ambassador Volker is... Well, why not release the transcript so you can all see what Ambassador Volker told us? There is no wrongdoing. He was completely as clear as could be, no quid pro quo whatsoever. The two guys on the call, no quid pro quo whatsoever. Democrat chairman, after they read the transcript, said no quid pro quo whatsoever. But Adam Schiff doesn't want that information out there. So he's holding up the transcript, and he continues to have this bias against the president, the way he runs things.
I believe that I do believe that we'll actually get to hear from the ambassador, but we'll only get to hear from him when there is a fair process. This is not a fair process. I can tell you, we spent more time in the Schiff last time with Ambassador Volker than Adam Schiff did. You know, he came out here, you may have noticed that, he came out here all to the press, and what did he do? He gave this benign thing and then raced off to a fundraiser. So here's what we have to understand, is this has to be a fair process. And when you have a press release being drafted by our Democrat colleagues, cherry-picking text messages, when the full text of Ambassador Volker's testimony last week would have exonerated this president, let's release it. I'm all for bringing the ambassador in, but let's only do so after we release the full.
Do you have any concerns about what we're talking about here? The president asking foreign government, one Ukraine, to investigate Joe Biden, and also the president saying last week that China should investigate Joe Biden. Do any of you have concerns about that?
The president's doing his job. President, when you're talking about the hard-earned tax dollars of the American people going to a foreign government, the president's going to make sure that there is no corruption there. He's doing his job, his duty as the commander-in-chief, his duty as the president of the United States. So I don't have a concern about that.
Given your concerns about this process, the next testimony is supposed to be
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see.
We would sure like to see the Volker testimony released before we continue the depositions and transcribed interviews. And what we see in this impeachment is a kangaroo court, and Chairman Schiff is acting like a malicious Captain Kangaroo. He lied about the Russia investigation, that he had more than circumstantial evidence. He lied about meeting with the whistleblower prior to the whistleblower's ultimate writing of their complaint. And we would like to unpack the last set of Schiff lies regarding the Volker testimony before we go to the next set of Schiff lies on Sondland or any further
We've been asking
witnesses.
for it since we had it. It should have been out immediately.
But the Democrats say Republicans are just obsessed with the contact between the chairman's office and the whistleblower, and that it's just a process issue. It doesn't really matter. How do you respond to that?
We think there are real concerns there. I know you've done some reporting on that, so we think there are real concerns that hopefully over time the American people will be able to see. Can't really get into all that, but yeah, we have real concerns.
Congress, should we take any legal action to actually try and unmask the whistleblower at any point?
No, but I think the American people have a right to know who the whistleblower is, but we're not going to do that.
Why would the State Department cancel this deposition just a few hours before it was set to begin, after Ambassador Sondland had already flown back here from Brussels?
I think the hope was we would have the Volker testimony released.
Give the majority enough time, the maximum amount of time to release the testimony that happened last week. And so we have that information out there, and we know in good faith that they in good faith are going to release the testimony for the American people to see, as opposed to parsing out little pieces that support their narrative. And if they're willing to do that, then I think that the administration will be willing to do more moving forward. But if it's going to be a one-sided deal.
Hold on, you guys are all journalists. Is there a single journalist here that doesn't want to see the full transcript of Ambassador Volker's testimony? I agree, and the American people agree with every one of you. Let them judge for themselves. That's what we need to do.
So there's an argument against releasing the Volker transcript before all the other witnesses testify.
You mean Adam Schiff made the argument?
I'm just putting it out there for you to respond. There's an argument against releasing the
Who
Volker.
made the argument? I haven't heard that argument, and so at this particular...
There's an argument against transparency. There's an argument. No, hold on a second. There's an argument in favor of cherry-picking selective releases of texts. There's an argument in favor of only telling the American public what is best in the interests of wanting to take down a sitting president. Maybe you should ask what was said inside of Volker's deposition during his transcribed interview with regards to Adam Schiff's fairy tale quid pro quo charge that aid from the United States to Ukraine was being linked to an investigation into the Bidens. Why don't you ask, what did Ambassador Volker say about that? That's a great question. I'm glad that you asked that question. And I'll tell you the reason why that question was so important for you to ask is for many things, because he was in this room for several hours. And during several hours of testimony, he talked about how President Zelensky had no idea that there was a hold on aid at the time of the July 25th call. Ambassador Volker testified about how the readouts of the phone call that was made to him, that there was nothing in the readouts about there being a hold on U.S. aid or a quid pro quo. Or Ambassador Volker testified, this is what the transcribed interview would tell you if you asked this question. I'm glad that we're having this discussion. The next day, Ambassador Volker meets with President Zelensky. And in that meeting, there is no reference to a quid pro quo or President Zelensky having any idea that there was a hold on aid. Or over the course of Ambassador Volker's next several weeks engaging with Ukraine. Ukraine makes no reference to there being a hold on aid or there being a quid pro quo. And by the way, you know what else Ambassador Volker testified to? This entire time, the aid was getting released. It was going to get released. And guess what happened? The aid got released. And you know what didn't have to happen? There was no new investigation that had to get created. This whole thing is a fairy tale. Adam Schiff is misleading you, and you're playing along with it. Many of you are, and the American public is then getting deceived. When Adam Schiff said, for example, that President Trump was asking President Zelensky to manufacture dirt on the Bidens, you know what Ambassador Volker testified to? That was absolutely untrue. Now that's what we would call an inconvenient fact for the narrative. You know what else Adam Schiff has been saying to you and the American public that was not true? that he had no contact with the whistleblower. He'd like to, but he didn't have any contact. He lied. You know what else he lied about? When he gave his opening statement from the acting director of national intelligence as to what was in front of the world as far as what the transcribed interview said. Now, going back to Ambassador Volker's transcribed interview and a process, we were here ready to do our part. If anyone is going to testify behind those closed doors, we're going to make sure that we're there to ensure that the other 99% of the story is being told. Because guess what? If we weren't there last Thursday, you would have no idea of everything that Ambassador Volker said to obliterate Adam Schiff's fairy tale quid pro quo charge. You would have no idea. So we're here. Now, as far as the administration goes, if they don't want to send Ambassador Sondland here, because this is a kangaroo court, because there has not been a vote to launch an impeachment inquiry, because minority does not have any rights for subpoenas, because the president doesn't have the right to have counsel present to ask questions, for subpoena power, to present evidence. This entire thing is a political charade, is a clown show. We're here, we're ready for whoever's going to be testifying in the other room, but we have to be here because if we're not, Adam Schiff sure as heck is not going to tell you, because all he has to do is right now release that transcribed interview, because he won't, because it destroys his narrative. It undercuts it, it blows it up. That's what we heard over the course of several hours. And by the way, Jerry Connolly comes on to, Aaron Burnett's show on CNN at 7 o'clock on Thursday, and they have a back and forth. They play a clip from Jim Jordan, they play a clip from me, where they're basically saying, Jerry Connolly, you didn't hear anything of what Jim Jordan and Lee Zeldin says that they heard, right? And they have this back and forth, basically dumbing down their audience. And what isn't pointed out in that back and forth is that Jerry Connolly was the last person to show up. He's the first one to leave instantly. He wasn't there for any of it. So what's important is that we are here, and we can answer any question you want as far as what Ambassador Volker testified to, credibly, exceptionally, professionally. But you're not asking any of the most important questions. Some of you are, but many of you aren't asking the most important questions, such as, what did you hear last Thursday that we don't yet know about? Adam Schiff won't answer, but he should. He should release the transcript.
Congressman,
We'll take a couple more.
Congressman, the president, the White House has repeatedly refused to hand over documents. Now the administration is blocking a key interview. Doesn't that imply that there's something they're trying to hide?
No, it implies exactly what Mr. Zeldin just said.
Just the fairness.
Exactly what I don't think anyone could say it better than Lee just said it. That's the focus.
So you would encourage people to defy congressional subpoenas?
No, we're not saying that. We're saying we would encourage Adam Schiff to run a fair process. That's what we're
Which
encouraging.
Americans would go on trial without their counsel?
Should they appear with a subpoena?
Which Americans would go on trial without their counsel?
I'm asking, should they defy subpoenas?
There should be a fair. We'll take
House
Nick.
Democrats should have a vote.
We'll take a couple more and we'll go.
That's the next step.
Would you all support a vote on the House floor to give yourselves more rights and a fair process for this?
That's Nancy Pelosi's call. She's the one who wants to strike while the iron's hot. That's her
I would
call.
probably vote against that.
Yeah. Same here.
Which of you believe that bribery is the only impeachable offense? You keep talking about quid pro quo. Which of you believe bribery is the only impeachable offense?
Whistleblower left blank the section about congressional notification. Does that impact the credibility of the whistleblower?
Absolutely.
If that's the case,
absolutely.
and there's been reporting, I know there's been reporting,
The congressional
that is-
notification box is left blank.
yeah, and I think that's a big problem. That is a big problem.
We gotta
Because
get
remember, there was a preliminary investigation done by the Inspector General that brought this forward, and if the whistleblower is not being forthcoming with the,
That's a federal form.
It's a big problem.
What attaches to a federal form is perjury.
yeah, and frankly, I think the American people have a right to know who this whistleblower is. If we're talking about the impeachment of the President of the United States, I think that's important.
Is it appropriate for the president to seek out the identity of the whistleblower?
All I'm saying is I think it's appropriate for the American people to know who the person is behind this charge that the Democrats are pursuing, removing the President of the United States, the leader of the free world, 13 months before an election. I think the American people have a right to know that.
Does the person's identity deserve to be protected?
I think it's also important to point out that you all know, the American public all knows now more than the whistleblower does. So this whole thing about what does the whistleblower know? We're telling you, they now know less than what you all know. So we should be talking about what we know now and how to go forward. Talking about kangaroo court, you know what else Jim Jordan pointed out when we were here a few days ago? Was how when we showed up on Thursday, Adam Schiff started by the ground rules was that this was going to be a staff-led transcribed interview. And then it wasn't until Jim Jordan pushed back that Adam Schiff reluctantly said that he would allow members to ask questions. But it was discouraged. He was strongly discouraging members to ask questions. And by the way,
until it went so bad for Adam Schiff that he jumped in for 25 minutes and voices cracking when they start to look at this. Why? Because Ambassador Volker was not giving them the answers that they were leading Ambassador Volker to conclude. I can tell you that this is nothing more than, Adam Schiff talked about 4 acts. You know what? There are 4 acts. And the first, second, third, and fourth act already has reached a conclusion for Adam Schiff. Let the American people decide what the final act will be, because ultimately, when the truth comes out, you will see that this president did not hold aid to try to influence a foreign country to do anything.
One last thing. One other thing that's really important to point out is that another show put up on Sunday, one of the texts from Bill Taylor. That show then did not follow that text with the response that absolutely says unequivocally that there is no quid pro quo. Furthermore, what that show did not say after that is the context from Ambassador Volker's transcript with regards to Bill Taylor's text. And you would then know if we all had the transcribed interview in front of us, but we'll tell you now, it's been out there in the public. He said it because he read a Politico story. And he wanted to get the aid to Ukraine released. He saw a Politico story and he was concerned, and then he was corrected. But why is it that the coverage is only going to show Bill Taylor's text and not show the response correcting it and not provide any context whatsoever? You know why I'm pissed as I stand here? Because right now, this Congress, our country, all across the entire country, there are people watching this who are disgusted with how 2019 has gone. That all of their priorities right now, why are we not working together to pass USMCA next week? We know that it'll grow jobs, increase investment in the United States, that it would increase GDP. Why are we not talking about USMCA? Why aren't we working on a bipartisan basis to lower prescription drug costs? Why are we not working together on a bipartisan process in order to pass all these different priorities that are really important to our constituents, Republicans and Democrats, conservatives, liberals? It's all to appease an enraged liberal activist base, insisting on resisting, impeaching, opposing, and obstructing everything and anything. We are all, as a country, being held hostage by a few members of Congress who have leveraged congressional primaries against Democratic leadership and committee chairs. They have instilled fear on the part of their colleagues in their own conference. And them and their activist base is preventing us from standing here for all of us to be able to spend 100% of our energy working together in order to pass bipartisan important priorities for our country. So if we sound like we're pissed as we stand here, it's because we are. The American people are getting screwed by an enraged liberal activist base demanding impeachment. They don't even care what the crime is. They don't care what the facts are. They don't care what the evidence is.
In the future, you'll decide to investigate.
Thank you, guys.
Democratic
Thank you.
practices.